So that's a question, right? And I don't know if consulting firms see this way, but what I see this is like when I go to help somebody, right? Listen, there is nothing that I am going to show you that you can't find some other place. But the question is, if you want to go faster, if you want to go with a little more certainty, if you want someone to hold your hand while you do it, those are the things that I show up for, right? And I say that because, you've witnessed that some people go, well, hell, I just didn't know what to do. And this cat showed up and knew what to do. And that was worth my money and his time and expertise. That was a great and fair trade, right? And there are other people who goes, oh my God, you only took 2 minutes to fix it. And they want to fight about what the price was at that point, right? Mm-hmm. That's something else that's going on. And I suspect, I've talked to a guy every week and he's, Cap Gemini, and he's working for a big firm Midwest, right? And they fight all the time with them about the solution.
And that's a really good anecdote, Wendy. I'd be inclined to throw that in. I think it brings it to life.
Love it. Absolutely. Well, Phil, it's
already in.
Yeah, it's already
He's
in.
already sold it. He's already sold it.
It's the cold open.
This is the way he's doing it. He's like, I'm just going to ask a couple questions. You guys riff and shit, tape. It's off.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Lockhart. Welcome to Consultants Saying Things. We have a full cast. It's great to see you guys. I don't think, Wendy, Oliver, we last saw each other in London, I think it was. And some good conversations and whatnot there. Today, what I really wanted to talk about, and I know we've talked a little bit about this in the past. We've touched on it, everyone's talking about AI, blah, 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 blah. But, I think historically, when we've been talking about this, we were talking about it through the lens of AI coming for sort of, I don't want to call them commodity, but sort of some of the more technical type of consulting jobs, developers and things like that, and how some of the AI tools are able to do some of that, and folks in those roles have really got to start thinking about like, well, hey, how do I navigate this? And I think increasingly, and Oliver, we've talked about this. We clearly see these models evolving. We see the technologies and the capabilities getting better and better and better. I mean, when we first started talking about this, you could tell an AI generated image. Now it's indecipherable, right, from reality. As these things get better, I think they're increasingly coming after sort of what we used to think of sort of as like white collar strategy advisory type consulting, and not just the technical consulting. And this corresponds with an article, and I'll share it on the thing, but some of the firms are having some decrease in the amount of billings that they're getting, and is this a result of some of these changes in technology? So the question is really, what does a strategy and advisory firm or set of consultants do about this, right? I mean, you don't just change your skill set, right? So like, how do we navigate this? And I think it goes to really the question of what does a firm really need to do, but then also what does sort of the individuals need to do within this, right? And I mean, Phil, we were talking before, and I know you came up with some really good questions, and I think the one that really focuses me on this is like, what are we selling, right? Are we selling a framework? Are we selling something spit out of Claude or something like what are we selling? And I know that there are other questions, and I want to talk about things like credibility and accountability and some other things. But Phil, I don't know if you just wanted to sort of take that first bit and sort of riff a bit on that, and what are we selling, and how do we navigate this now with AI coming after all of our jobs?
Yeah. I think AI is creating in this space, right, the great bifurcation. And so you had people who were below the mean and those who are above the mean, right? Or the median in this case, right? And what I'm thinking about that is that, it used to be that our clients were buying thinking and it was just something outside of them. And now I think that if you want to be at the top of this, your clients are buying outcomes, right? So it's not tools, it's not just having you noodle over a thing with them. It's like, no, man, we're looking for actual change. And the people that we trust, because we know everybody's using these tools, some are going to get great results, and some are just going to get, at best, average results out of it. We don't need average thinking. You don't need to be the average firm. You need to figure out how you're going to be in the top half of this sorting hat of consultants, right? How am I going to be one of the top cats to make this work?
And I mean, Wendy wrote a book on strategy through execution, right? Strategy to execution.
To reality.
So it's over here somewhere. I'm still unpacking. So
it's after the Tusculan disputations. It's right next to that on the.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. It's near the Greek myths.
Yeah.
But is it enough? Is it, because we know a lot of firms talk about like, oh, we do strategy and delivery, we do strategy through execution and intersection of business and technology. Is that enough going forward, or do we need something else? We need to be able to provide context around the thing that's delivered as well, especially if we're not actually delivering the thing. Some chat GPT agent model, whatever, is actually doing the work. We need to do more, don't we? Or do we?
I mean, we spoke a little bit about this before we got recording, but these tools are still tools, and they still very much operate off of good input, right? So, and then the other thing we touched on is, why do people buy consultants in the first place? And it's not always because they just don't have the time. It's because they want some kind of degree of shifting of risk and accountability. So I think we need to take a step back and think about, what is it that we're providing as consultants? And I think what I saw happening with consulting was it was bleeding into lower value areas. And I think we touched on this before on the podcast. Arguably, getting a very expensive consulting firm to do managed operations for your firm, including admin support, creating slides or creating reports, whatever, perhaps wasn't the best use of the value of a consulting firm. The consulting firm liked it because they were able to land and expand and offer other services. But actually, is that, if you get back to the heart of what the consulting is about, is that really where the value is? Probably not going forwards.
Right. And I mean, Wendy, we should tell everyone that you sail a lot, right? And you were sailing, and you had an anecdote which I think illustrates, what Oliver is talking about, right? It's not just the thing; it's wisdom or knowledge about the thing.
I couldn't agree more. And credit to Phil on this, because it is outcome based, it is value based, and it's sort of the human journey side of this. Like, when someone has a challenge or a goal, it's helping them understand, what questions do I ask? What steps do I take? What have other people done? And so there's a human guidance and interaction. There is a trust, and there is an acceleration. I think all of those things are really important. And the anecdote I'll share from just a recent sailing trip was, we had a motor issue and we were stuck in port, and we were quite far away from home on a small island. This technician comes from, we literally got his name from someone at the grocery store. He comes and looks at this motor, very old motor. And, in minutes, he knows exactly what's wrong. He goes and futzes in his shop, come back, fixes it. And so I know it sounds like a silly story, but that is invaluable to us. Could we have gone on ChatGPT and figured out what was wrong with this motor? Yes, maybe. But the fact that he accelerated us so we could get back on the water, and doing so with confidence, knowing that we actually fixed the issue, it's invaluable. It's the human side of it. And just him as a person made us feel really good.
Yeah. And if something goes wrong, you can blame them for it, right?
That's the other side.
There's an element here of people buy people as well. People don't buy things that imitate people.
That's right.
Yeah, and maybe in the past, or maybe in certain scenarios, you're buying a framework, right? Or you're buying maturity model or whatever. But I think you're right, Oliver, right? Because it's like, it's not just that. It's, I need to have context around the thing that I'm delivering. Fluency in a particular industry, vertical or whatever it might be. Like these people that know, claims processing better than anyone else on the planet. It's like, can ChatGPT and can the models learn all of that? Probably, but I think there's other elements here that, to your point, Oliver, you're buying more than just the widget, right? You're buying a person, and the knowledge and the wisdom, right, that comes along with them. Phil, you were going to say something. I think I interrupted you.
I'm always about to say something, but I'm training myself to listen in that moment. I wanted to come back just to that story that Wendy had told for just a second. You could see her remembering the joy of like having that problem solved by another person. She went from uncertainty and not knowing how this might get fixed. Is this a big problem or a little problem? She didn't know the answer to any of that yet, right? And when she got across the bridge, and this person had got her across the bridge to the point where this was working again, she's like, and it worked. And her face lights up. This is the thing you're selling. You think you're selling PowerPoint? It's not that. You're selling the feeling into that company. This worked. We got to this spot. And, you are in your consulting practice, right? In an advisory role, you're trying to get people from where they are to where they want to be. You are the bridge. You're the person that's pulling them across the bridge. And if you keep that in mind, I think there's plenty for you to do here.
Phil, I think that's so beautifully said. And that's the promise in all of this, right? Consulting may be at an inflection point, but I think it's going to get us to a place where we are happier delivering services and delivering better services than just serving up information. And also organizations getting better value and hopefully being more accountable.
Yeah, I always think that people are hiring me for my thinking, right, or their ability to walk them through a problem. And in that spot, right, I whether I'm one LLM or the other, it's a force multiplier for me. So the cool thing is that, if they brought me on as a guide, if that was my role to be their Yoda in that spot, right, then we're just going to get faster, right? We get trained faster. We get to the end faster. But I don't think it makes me go away. I'm not worried about it yet.
Is it only about speed? It's not just about getting faster, right?
There was something that I wanted to build on what Phil was saying, which is, and actually what Wendy was saying about, the kind of specialist that knows exactly where the problem is and when what tool to use. And I think this is totally true here. It's just the tool is an information-based tool. And let's face it, it's kind of no different to recent sort of developments in analytics and like knowing how to kind of connect up some data and run some queries and that was a lot harder. Now it's been made a lot easier. And I do wonder whether we're just talking about, someone who really knows how to use the tools at their disposal. It's just the tools have elevated to a point now where, we're operating at a different level. We're not scrambling around with databases anymore. We're able to say, here's my data set, talk to me about it. I want to slice and dice it this way. So I think there is something about, to your point, not just speed, it's about sort of certainty and data-driven consulting. Like I think perhaps in the past you would trust someone to come in, their experience is enough. To Wendy's point earlier, like they've seen 100 boats with this problem, they know where the problem is. I think going forward, particularly perhaps on the more junior side of consulting, you're going to have people that just really know how to use these tools really, really well so that they can be coached by these tools, or these tools can enhance their capabilities. And it will be, I want to choose a firm that I trust, but also I know is training its staff or knows how to augment itself effectively, and where to make the right judgment calls about where they use their own lived and breathed experience versus relying on a tool to augment them or augment them with different answers. So I think there is there's an operating model shift here for sure that most consultancies are going to need to be looking at. And I know certainly, myself, we're asking ourselves these questions of where does these new tools slot into the operating model of our organization.
That's an interesting point. I mean, we are also looking at our offerings, our service offerings, and rethinking sort of how they are today and going forward. And it's not just enough to say like, oh, we have a new offering, AI. It's the AI offering. It's like, no, it's right. It's like, yeah, whatever. But it's like, no. If we're doing, we still do tech transformation, but now it's got a AI element to it, or language about it, right? It's woven into basically everything, right? I think it is at this point, and I think where we're going is, not just coming out and saying, we'll give you an LLM, or we'll train your whatever to do whatever. We're going to continue to provide the services we historically had provided, but we're going to do it with AI fluency, right? With AI baked in as part of the thing, and helping our clients understand how to alter their operating model or adjust their operating model to accommodate that stuff, right? Because it's different.
There's some things that this technology unlocks as well, though. Like a lot of the conversations I've been having recently are around legacy systems transformation that previously clients would just be too afraid to go anywhere near, partly because the scale and the complexity is really high, but also the availability of expertise. So if we take COBOL, for example, or Fortran, still running an awful lot of the banking world today, some really interesting projects where looking at not necessarily taking COBOL and turning it into another programming language, not that leap, although I know some are looking at that. Actually taking all of your systems, code bases, and so on, and actually just documenting them really well and saying, hey, you thought you had this. This is actually a detailed business requirement spec, which you would then review and then probably feed into another AI that would help you plan, maybe even build and prototype a replacement or something that sits alongside. So I think there are some unique, scale or complexity problems we can now tackle with smaller teams as well, by the way. So this where we get into the operating model of, are you entirely hiring a team of people, or actually is this a blended kind of offering that has a degree of augmentation, particularly for specialist capability that we just don't, you can't get on the market. It's too expensive. So there's a recognition that you have a core human team, and they're augmented by I guess fairly soon agents, not just a Claude or a ChatGPT being used by a person, but effectively a member of the team that's looking at the project and is proactively responding with documents and with responses to issues and things like that. So that's what I mean when I say kind of operating model shift. It's allowing us to really rethink, how do we do engagements?
Yeah. So what I heard you say, Oliver, is it's all just really it's a better wrench, right? We've got a smarter, better.
That's one way of looking at it, or it's 1,000 wrenches when you only had access to 10 previously.
But of course, you still need to know where to bang the thing, right?
Correct. Yeah, and also I think we talked about this before. It's delegation is more important than ever. Like when you have a whole swarm of augmentation capability, clearly and concisely defining what the problem is, or defining what the tasks are that you're going to have executed on behalf of the client, becomes the real skill. It's like, how do I articulate the problem better? And it comes back to asking great questions. It's not just asking great questions of clients anymore. It's asking great questions of these platforms.
Better wrench, know how to use the wrench. We're not just delivering slide decks and frameworks. We're delivering outcomes that have value to the people that are stranded on an island with a broken engine, right? And that's by the way, I think it's a great sort of, anecdote and maybe metaphor for all of this, right? Which is, he could have had the most automated tool. You could have had the most automated tool, but it was the what'd you say, Phil? The joy, right? That you experienced, Wendy, that came out of that I think that is really critical. I mean, so then there's other aspects to this, right? There's the, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM, right? We've talked about this quite a bit, I think, right? Is what do we think about when it comes to accountability, right? With some of these tools, if it's 1,000 wrenches and we're not monitoring all 1,000 wrenches, and one of the wrenches does something rogue, where is the accountability end? And is that part of something maybe that an advisory firm can sell, or maybe that's part of the delivery offering, right? Is some warm fuzzy that what's being delivered is actually, the right thing. It's ethical and all that stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, you're a fool if you don't understand that you're selling trust, right? In this space, your clients have to trust you. So the first, when you begin spitting out bad work, whether it's due to you, due to a senior not looking at a junior's work, whether it's a junior not looking at their AI's work, it doesn't matter. So the work has to be good in order for you to be trusted. And you are, I always think about Harry Beckwith's book, Selling the Invisible. And he's like, you don't have to be great. You just have to avoid the mistakes. You have to be able to deliver again and again. And I think that's what we need to be able to see here. So, do not pass off bad work.
I like that.
Of course, this won't surprise anyone when I say it, but with this digital connected world, I think organizations inevitably are just going to have to take more responsibility for understanding their environment and what it's doing and its implications and its, the responsible aspects around it. That's where things like a business architecture can help us understand that. I think consultants can help organizations to understand how to be responsible and sustainable and ethical and do the right things. But I know, as we're saying, they can be confidence or sometimes a blame, as you like. But I think organizations are just going to need to take more responsibility in this world. Is my thought too. Or did I say?
Can I ask a follow-up on that, Wendy? I'm kind of curious about that. Do they need to take more responsibility, or they need to make sure that they don't use this sea change in order to try to shift the responsibility from themselves?
Beautifully said. I would say, Phil, yes and yes. And you said it a lot more eloquently is what I was trying to get at. We can't shift the responsibility. And I think we need to take more responsibility as well, though, as organizations have in the past. Just knowing what my environment and architecture is and what it's really doing.
And of course, we now have potentially better tools and wrenches to help us understand what that environment looks like. And I hope that it allows people to really focus on what is the value of my organization, come at it from an informed position. And but there is a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainty here. And I guess the big unknown, and one I think people need to be thinking about, is how much intellectual property of my organization or know-how, or particularly on the knowledge sort of side or information side, is potentially being hoovered up into a handful of technology companies. And I know that's the concern in Europe right now, quite frankly. Certainly, at least some of the organizations I'm talking to, is, are we seeing a massive vacuuming out of value from knowledge workers into a handful of generally US-based technology companies? And that's causing quite a bit of alarm. There are some European AI companies, of course. There's Chinese ones, but it's like, are we essentially, is Europe effectively going to be renting, knowledge capabilities from US tech companies? And today we see a certain level of capability, but we know these things only get better. And there's a lot of naivety, I think, around data, given how fast and loose the technology companies have played with intellectual property for the training, to think that they're not also doing something similar with the operation and inferencing and use of these models, I personally think is incredibly naive. So I appreciate I'm talking to a group of podcast colleagues here who are either US or mostly US or based in the US, or have serious US kind of history. So, but it's an interesting one to ponder for organizations that aren't in the tech sector.
Well, but I think it's. I understand from the whole regional or geopolitical aspect to it, right? But I think it's true within the United States, right? If you are a giant, if you're Bank of America, has your secret sauce, whatever that is, been sucked up into OpenAI or whatever, right? And I think that's a legitimate concern for everybody to have, quite frankly, because, you know, are they deviously going out and saying we're going to steal the secret sauce from Bank of America? I don't think so. I think they're just pointing the giant vacuum at everything and it's just sucking everything up. And we don't know what we got. Oh, hell, look at this. We got this, you know, choice information that could, you know, break a company. I think there's a lot of questions. So I think what I hear us saying, tell me if I'm wrong, there's really no good answer, right? To you know, what do I do if I'm in advisory consulting and strategy consulting? Should I be worried about AI? How do I navigate that? It's uncertain. We don't have good answers. And so I think the answer then is to be really clear about what it is that you're delivering, and really clear about what the value of that is to the people you're delivering it to, and whether that's you, your knowledge, your wisdom, your good feelings, your trust, whatever. I think what we're saying is it's no longer a framework, right? Because you can get that, like, pick it out of the air. But beyond that, it doesn't sound like, you know, there's a lot of really good answers on this because it's changing so quickly and it's still unfolding.
It is, but we've talked a lot about sort of human connection and human sort of buying drivers, right? And so I wonder if all the while the purchasing or the influencing is through a human being at a company or a client rather than a system, an algorithm selecting how it gets its strategy advice, which, let's say 10 years out, maybe that's the case, right? You have AIs procuring other data sources and other AI services. All the while we're still talking to human beings. I would hope there is a massive amount of value in human connection and the feelings piece that we touched on, like Wendy's feeling of joy, of satisfaction, because there's the old adage, isn't there, that says people will forget what you told them, but they won't forget how you made them feel. So if you give them that trust and the warm fuzzies that I know, Chris, you like to talk about, then that clearly continues. All the while we are continuing to work with clients on a human basis. What's interesting for me is, does this world fundamentally shift to the point where, much like as a consumer, what's the first thing you do now? You would generally reach for Google and increasingly now things like ChatGPT to answer your questions. Do consultancies shift in the medium to longer term to more of an interface to some of these platforms where, hey, this answer was, you know, do you want the upgraded answer that's powered by McKinsey? You know, is that what's coming in the so actually, rather than have a human conversation about, you know, strategy, are you actually uploading your, you know, last year's sales, your work in progress strategy deck, or the AI assisted artifact? And is this whole world actually disrupted by the fact that you're no longer really engaging, like I say, on a human to human basis? You're actually expecting this to be like a plug-in to your collaborative document working environment. I think this is the sort of thinking consulting organizations really need to think about, right? Is this could fundamentally just shift people's expectations about how do I get advice and advisory? Do I get that in a human meeting or a call, or do I get that as a, you know, insights peppered into the document I'm drafting right now?
So, I mean, you know, like so many of our conversations, it seems to come back to, Phil, stuff that you've routinely said, right? Be a good person, be a good human, I think it was, right? Ask good questions. But I think the nuance here is, you know, with this increasingly, some of your value as a strategy and advisory consultant is knowing which question to ask. Even if you have, you know, the fastest warp reactor driven ChatGPT, whatever, if you don't know the question to ask, if you don't know where to bang the wrench on the engine, you don't get any value out of it, right?
Yeah. You know, the thing is it enough? And as Oliver was talking, I was thinking about the transition we did in America in two places. And I say it in America because I don't know what the reality is in the UK. Pay at the pump. We completely eliminated the person who put gas in our car.
Except in New Jersey, I believe, and still in New Jersey, I think.
I know that. I knew that there were exceptions. There we go. And the ATM, right, was the same thing. We went from dealing with bank tellers and having a bank teller as a valued human part of the transaction to saying, you know, the human wasn't really doing anything except maybe getting it wrong from time to time. And so maybe it was better to just have this thing automated. Here's the deal. I think as an advisory council, you do not want to be at that end of the transaction, right? You want to be higher level in that thinking. You want to be working at the, Wendy talks about the strategy side of this, right? But you want to be at that point where they're doing that higher level thinking. And I think you really want to be at the spot where your customer is figuring out how they deal with their customer, right? And the extent that you can be inside that piece of the transaction, I think it's higher and higher value. But I think if you can imagine, a really good calculator doing your job, you should be thinking about doing something else.
And
that sounds like a great note to end on. Sorry, Wendy, you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
No, all good. I was just going to say, Phil, as you were talking about working at the right level and the strategic level, you also remind me of another really important human part here, which is the change. And, as much as the world is changing fast, organizations are made up as people, as we always say, right? And people only change so fast. So having someone, again, with the human side that can help us through change, that we can trust through it, I think also shouldn't be underestimated as value in addition.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. The thing is, I don't know that we know what the speed of this is going to be, right? So we're going to be helping people figure that out. But is this a 5-year thing, a 10-year thing? And it's funny because even now, as I'm sitting here thinking about pay at the pump and ATMs, there's a certain percentage of our audience that will not remember we used to do this differently.
Well, I was actually going to take it a little bit of a different direction. There's a certain, maybe it's generational, but there's a certain segment of people that listen to us that have never used an ATM because they just do tap to pay on everything, right? And it's just everything's in their phone. I mean, now that I got to be honest with you, now that my Model 3 Performance, beautiful freaking rocket ship of a car, by the way, full self-driving, it was awesome. But now that I have that, like I keep forgetting my wallet, my keys, like because I don't use them, I don't need them anymore. And I keep losing them because I just like leaving them places where like that used to be your wallet, your keys. That was central. Now it's just your phone, right? And so I think like the ATM. But here's the thing: you want to be the guy. I think what I heard you say, Phil, is you want to be the guy imagining the tap to pay as a replacement for the ATM, right? Like that's the higher level thinking, right? Not a better ATM, but like imagining it away, right?
It's going up the value. It's going up the value chain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I like this. This turned out all right. Yeah, they don't always. I mean,
who knew? Who knew?
I do not.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Ollie, Wendy, Phil, good to see you. I'm Chris Lockhart. Thanks, everybody. Like and subscribe. Click the bell. Ding, ding, ding. See you all next time. All right. Cool.